The camps of former Vice President Atiku Abubakar and former Anambra State Governor Peter Obi have rejected calls for opposition parties to unite behind a single presidential candidate ahead of the 2027 election. Both camps support wider cooperation among opposition parties, but insist their presidential ambitions remain intact. The position could complicate efforts by the G100 initiative led by former Progressive Governors Forum Director General Salihu Lukman to build a united platform against the ruling APC. Atiku's camp says Nigerians should judge candidates by their policies, while Obi's NDC maintains he is its preferred option for any future consensus arrangement. The development highlights the challenge of agreeing on a single opposition candidate for 2027. Now, to discuss this, we are now joined by political affairs analyst, Professor Simeon, Nnah, and a political analyst, Abdullahi Machina. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to start with you, Professor Nnah. What are the implications of Atiku and Obi rejecting a single candidate opposition arrangement?
Well, the implications are obvious. The ambitions of these two candidates was equally what truncated the 2023 elections. Because if two of them had come together in 2023, we won't be where we are today. Again, one expects that one of them should shield the sword, swallow his pride, and give in, so that Nigeria will be better for it. But, if you look at the political sphere now, there are so many pretenders, more pretenders than contenders in the coming election. We have about 19 of them, and I can tell you for free, some of them are pretenders. They are just there to make a name for themselves, maybe make a living after that, because what some of them will do now is that at the twilight of the election, they look at a candidate that will want to win, and they will say, I will collapse my structures to join this political party for political gains. But the two major gladiators are our concerns, and I want to join the G10 to talk to them that one of them should swallow his pride. I don't want to be specific here, but, there was somebody that was expected in 2023 to do something which he failed to do. Atiku Abubakar, failed to allow his chairman to step down. And that was one of the major issues that PDP had in 2023. Again, when they were coming together, recall that both of them were in ADC, but there were irreconcilable differences that led to Obi leaving the party for him to a new party, the NDC. And as it stands today, there's a stalemate because two of them are sticking to their guns. And if we're talking of people filing behind a candidate, it should be behind either of them. And since none of them is yielding grounds, I listened to Sheabu, one of the communication aides of Atiku, and he's saying that we should look at Atiku's manifesto, that he's there to show what he has. At the end of the day, what manifesto? That's the question I will ask. Now, Obi, the secretary of the party, is equally saying that it has all it takes,
Professor, let me come to you now, Aliyu. I want to know, can a fragmented opposition realistically defeat an incumbent under Nigeria's 2-term presidential electoral threshold? Let me move my question, direct my question now to you, Professor Nnah. Do you think a fragmented opposition realistically can defeat an incumbent under Nigeria's 2-term presidential electoral threshold? My question is to you, Professor Nnah. Yeah.
If they could not do it when they didn't have the mandate and they didn't have the forces, the finances, and every other thing behind him, it will be a tall order now that he has everything going for him. He has all the monies in the world. He has all the paraphernalia of office. He has all the security agencies behind him. So it's going to be a tall order. Although it is not impossible, because recall that Jonathan was in power when the opposition took power away from him. So it is a possibility. But it would have been an easier thing if they had come together and come as a force. It would have been easier.
Well, my next question is to you, Abdullahi Machina. How does the spread of opposition votes across multiple candidates now affect the chances of meeting the constitutional requirements for winning the presidency?
Well, thank you very much. We need to understand the political history very well. For me, I understand that these candidates are interested in their own personal interest, that the interest of the country. We understand also that this individual candidate, especially from the ADC and the other opposition party, are not interested in coming together. These are two candidates who are opposing each other in order to promote their own interests or to become the president. And this is not possible. And this is not something that is going to be easy. And even an average Nigerian understand that when these candidates are not coming together, they will not going to win the 2027, or there are no any possibility of them winning the election. Coming back to your question, I think none of these will meet the constitutional requirement, because if you look at OB, it's only dominant, especially in the southeastern part of the country, and you're not going to get, the 25% constitutional requirement for him to be the president, because he don't have that political advantage. Even when he has Konkoso as his own vice president, they can only stop in Kano and in the northern part of the country, but they cannot separate, across all the country and get, 25% out of the 36 state of the country. So I think for me, this will give advantage to the sitting president, because if this opposition didn't come together, unite under one umbrella, we could remember that in 2014 or in build-up to 2015 election, it was not fragmented opposition that defeated Jonathan. It was opposition that came together. Atiku was part of that, merger that, produced led President Buhari in 2015. And that is the only way, we can defeat, or the opposition can come together and defeat the sitting, president. But I don't think if there is any possible way of defeating, except, when they come together and then, drop their own personal interests and unite under one umbrella to defeat, the sitting and president. For me, I can see it is very clear that none of them will get that constitutional requirement as far as they are fragmented, across the country. Everybody wants to be a president. So we are not interested in the interests of the larger Nigerians. I think there are no possibility of them getting that either Atiku or be the constitutional requirement for them to be the president. That is not forthcoming.
All right, Aliyu, so tell me, what political mathematics would you say can determine whether be it Atiku, Obi, or another opposition candidate has the strongest national coalition going into 2027? Abdullahi, are you still there?
Yes, I'm there.
So my question is, what political mathematics would determine whether Atiku, Obi, or another opposition candidate has the strongest national coalition going into the 2027 general election?
Well, I think we need to stop deceiving ourselves, especially the opposition party. We all know that when we didn't come, there are no any mathematical, calculation that will produce either of the two at the president of this country. The only thing is for them to come together and unite. But this is not forthcoming. All of them wanted to be president. They are pushing for them to be a president. of this country, and that is not possible. And as long as the opposition party are divided, they will not come together and push for particular interest, the interest of the country. I think it's giving advantage to the sitting president, and they will continue to win the election in 2027, unless and until when the opposition, kept their own differences aside and their personal interests come together and face, the sitting president. That is the only way they can defeat the sitting president. But I don't think if these people are ready to come together and unite under one umbrella to defeat the president. All of them are, interested in their own personal interests of being the president of the country, and there are no any mathematical calculation that will, give them an easy way to the presidency.
All right, my next question is to you, Professor Nnah. Could multiple opposition candidates actually be strategically, beneficial by expanding the opposition's voter reach across, different regions and demographics?
Yeah, that's what everybody is talking about. If they expand the demography and their reach, it will be a good thing for the opposition. But let me correct an impression here that Obi will not make 25% of 2/3 of the 36 states. I think that's a very wrong notion, because he did that in 2023, and he's bound to do that. In fact, in 2023, he met all the criteria, including winning in Abuja, so he met all the threshold in 2023. I recall that in that same 2023, they said it was a social media party, that it didn't have structures. He destroyed that myth that it is only structures that win election. With the social media move, he won. He met all the thresholds. Now, going forward in this election, yes, expected that their spread will help. With Kwankwaso there, with his own structures, and the structure he has acquired since that 2023, I think it's going to be a tough battle. I agree that it's not going to be an easy one to beat an incumbent.
Well, looks like we've lost contact with Professor Nnah. But
for anybody to think that it is impossible. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Please go ahead, please.
Yeah. I said for anybody to think that it is an impossibility for an Obi to win the threshold for becoming president in 2027, I think that is something, the joke of the century, because it's going to meet all the thresholds. But winning the election is a different ballgame. Recall in this country that we don't just win election in the polls. There are other ways people use to win election. But if you go to that election fair and square, I can tell you for free, you can go to the bank with it, that they are likely to win that election. But with the way we play politics in this country, I always address them as politicians and playing politics. So when they bring their tricks into bear, then that is what will change the equation. But if there's a free and fair election, believe you me, you can go to the bank with it. Obi will make a mark in 2027. That is, if he does not win that election.
All right. Just before we wrap this conversation up, let me ask you this question, Abdullahi. What are the major obstacles to, negotiating a credible power sharing, or should I say presidential ticket arrangement among the opposition parties?
Well, I think the major obstacle is that the individual candidates across the major opposition party are only interested in their own personal interests of being the president of this country. So they are not interested in the majority of the country. We all know that Nigeria is in a very difficult situation economically and also in terms of security. These are what Nigerians are looking for. They wanted to get out of this economic, hardship, and they wanted also to get out of this, insecurity that almost everybody in Nigeria is complaining. So the opposition are not looking at that. They are looking at wanted to be ambition of of their individual ambition of wanted to be the president of this country. Unless and until when we separate our own personal interests for the development of the country, then we see the possibility of producing another candidate apart from what we know in the previous election has produced. In fact, even in 2023, the reason why Bola Ahmed Tinubu came on board, it was because it was as a result of divided oppositions. Whenever there is something like this in a political setting like Nigeria, it means it's going to give advantage to the sitting president for him to continue being in the presidency. So I think, like I mentioned, the major obstacle, is their own personal interest, because they have been driven by their own personal interest. If they are really interested in addressing the issue of the country, if they are really interested in addressing all the problems that Nigerians are facing, they should come together and drop their own personal interest,
All right,
and also ignore their own ego for them to come together and form united force for them to defeat the president and provide solution to Nigerians.
all right, Professor Nnah and, of course, Abdullahi Machina. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the news.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.